Hello, hello, and welcome to my once a month a convo with. And today I have a special guest here, Itchy Bacca. And I was telling him back, before we became live on the stream here, I'm so excited to get him in the hot seat. And basically, he was making me laugh because I compared him to peeling back an onion or peeling back all the layers that he has going on for himself and what he does to protect the domain and mythos of Star Wars. And so, hello, Itchy. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you doing tonight? I'm doing pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty nice night.
Yes, it is. And for everybody who celebrates the let's say Thanksgiving. Geez, it's my favorite holiday, Thanksgiving, because you get to eat. But Valentine's, happy Valentine's to you, and thank you guys for coming in and watching this a convo with. And I am so excited. You know, we got into a serious conversation before we actually went live, and I can't wait to get into it some more as well. So
sure.
There's something, like I've always wondered about what got you into Star Wars.
Well, I'm part of the generation which you might call what some folks refer to as the first fans.
Mm-hmm.
It's really difficult for younger generations to really understand the kind of impact Star Wars had on the pop culture landscape in the late 70s. So it really hit people hard because there really wasn't anything out there quite like it. Space 1999 kind of came close just prior to. You had things like the Planet of the Apes franchise, sci-fi shows like $6 Million Man. For the most part, they were all kind of hokey.
Yeah.
You know, particularly the hardcore science fiction genre in general. And then Star Wars came along with this used universe, and, everything in there looked realistic and real and like it was a real world. And so that's what kind of drew me to it.
Okay.
And my primary interest really was in the filmmaking aspect of it. I certainly got into a good portion of the mythos aspect of it, but my primary interest was always in the filmmaking aspect of it. So I was always seeking out behind the scenes articles in Starlog magazine, little segments on Entertainment Tonight, or the behind the scenes documentaries they would put out on PBS.
Yes.
Whatever I could find, and that's primarily where my interest in it was.
Oh, that's interesting because my interest in you guys, if you know by my channel, is like more of the mythos, the continuity, all the brilliance between George and the writers he hired, and and his departments created Star Wars under. But yes, I loved behind the scenes stuff, like what was George's thoughts and feelings about creating this unique franchise and this unique mythos. And so that's what got me interested in Star Wars. And I was a Star Wars fan from once I was little when Empire Strikes came out. So what was your first movie that you watched? I mean, did you start with Star Wars, the actual first one, or did you start?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, with A New Hope right away.
Yeah.
I am old enough to have actually watched the holiday special when it aired on television live. And so, yeah, that was my first experience, was the first film.
Yeah.
I can remember taking glass milk jugs, the empty glass half-gallon bottles, walking them to the penny candy store to get the return money to buy Star Wars cards.
Wow. Oh God, the collector's cards.
Yeah.
Do you still have any?
No. All that stuff is gone.
I mean, you'd be amazed on what people can hold on to, but over my years, I lost, some stuff. Like I started collecting the books. I used to go and when I got into the EU, I used to go to the library and check out the books to read. And then I slowly started getting some books, and I lost them too. So.
Yeah, I bought a number of novels in the 90s. I had, read when they were coming out quite a bit.
Yeah.
I had read a number of them. It's been so long now since the 90s that I've forgotten a good portion of what I had read.
Yeah.
But, during retirement, I hope to dive into it again.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to address my co-host, my co-pilot for Coffee Chat. Alora is drinking a burger snicker coffee with a straw. You just, again, Stig, just stop it. It is a regular coffee. he makes fun of us women, or us who like, the flavored specialty coffee drinks, and he just coffee, and hey, I respect that, but he gives us a hard time saying they put hamburger in there, they put cabbage in there. What have you.
I'm not a coffee drinker myself. I tend to stay away from caffeine.
Yeah. Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah.
I love my caffeine. I quit sodas about almost 20 years ago.
Okay.
Then I just stick with like coffee and teas.
Yeah.
Mainly, and so that's my thing right there. So
nice.
That's what I do. So, all right. So going back to the questions there. So which one of the, which OT and PT are your favorite? And out of all 6 of the movies, which one is your number 1 pick to watch?
When it comes to obviously I prefer the original trilogy to the prequel trilogy. When it comes to the original trilogy, which film is my favorite? It's really hard for me to choose because I kind of see all 3 as one monolithic movie. It's Act 1, 2, and 3. So it's really difficult for me to tell. It would probably be a tie between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
Return of the Jedi falls off a little bit because the second act in that movie kind of drags a little bit.
Okay.
In between where Leia meets up with Wicket, and when they arrive at the Death Star, it just kind of drags a little bit. And other than that, I really like Return of the Jedi too.
Okay. Awesome. I know it is. And when you made a great point about that, because it's like Act 1 and 2, Act 1, 2, 3. And it basically, it's Luke Skywalker's hero's journey among, even Han's and Leia's. They have their own version of their journey on their transformation in that. And we see that take place.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Empire probably comes out a little bit ahead of New Hope for me.
Okay.
Mainly because I love the way, well, really, Lucas did this in all of his movies, but every time he put out a new Star Wars movie, you were seeing something new.
Yeah.
You weren't seeing, when he came out with Empire Strikes Back, you weren't seeing just more X-Wings and TIE fighters. You got to see, now they had a Super Star Destroyer, and they had the Probot. They had Tauntauns instead of Dewbacks. They had all these different new things. And again, it happened again in Return of the Jedi, where they added these new things. And, that's something that's kind of lost in the Disney movies. They really don't put anything new. It's all rehashed stuff mostly.
Yeah. Yeah. So with the PT, you probably see them the same way. But do you have a favorite in that?
Probably Revenge of the Sith would be my favorite. I do like all of them. I like the prequel trilogy. I always have since I first saw them when they first premiered. I do think they're a bit of a mixed bag. I think they have their problems in mostly in just the screenplay and the dialogue. They probably could have stood to have 1 or 2 more rewrites, but at the end of the day, it's a work of art, and at some point you have to put it out to the world.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of things to really love in the prequels, particularly the art design is fantastic.
It is.
And at the end of the day, they're the biggest budget independent movies ever made, because George Lucas bankrolled them himself. So that's something to be, give Lucas a lot of respect for. I have a lot of respect for him for being able to pull that off.
Yeah. Yeah, and I over the topic and everything that's been going on, Gina Carano, and people chastising her for taking the deal with Daily Wire, because they're now going into filmmaking and stuff. And I was having this back and forth with someone, and I was like, you know what, someone can set their goals and accomplish stuff outside of the norm, outside of corporations, like even including film corporations. And they're like, no, she can't, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, if George Lucas can do it, that means anybody can do that. He stepped away from Hollywood. And then their excuse was like, oh, well, that was back in the 70s. It's a different time. I'm like, no, it's the same goal. As long as you have your mind put towards it, you can accomplish anything. It takes determination, a lot of hard work, and George is the evidence. And then they went on to bash George and then bash the people he hired. And I was like, all right, this is who I'm dealing with.
Well, it's so, we live in a very, everybody keeps saying it, a very polarized era. So it seems like folks either have to hate someone or love someone. There's no in between. For instance, when it comes to Lucas, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the man, but I'm also able to see his flaws, particularly as I've gotten older. You kind of look back on some of the things he said and done, and you realize where his faults are. And look, everybody has faults. Nobody's exempt from that. But it's possible to like someone and respect someone and still acknowledge that they have flaws, because everyone does.
Yeah.
But, a lot of the younger people aren't able to do that. It's either love someone or hate someone completely. You either love everything they say or you hate everything they say. You can't, support something they say and dislike other things they say. It's all one way or the other.
Yeah, exactly. And we have Nexus Prime here. This is to you. What it was like to have Star Wars comics telling stories between the movies back in the 70s and 80s, Itchy. So basically he wants to know if how did it feel, or what was it like for you to have the comics back in the between the movies?
It wasn't as prevalent in the 70s and 80s as it was in the 90s. In the 90s, they just, after Timothy Zahn's initial trilogy was a huge success, they just pumped the novels out like crazy after that. But in the 70s and 80s, you had, with regards to novels, you had the 3 Han Solo novels, you had the 3 Lando Calrissian novels, you had the movie novelizations, which I was never too much interested in because I'd rather just watch the movie. But a lot of people enjoyed those. And usually when the movie, particularly around the time that the movie was out, you'd see them on end caps at like grocery stores, oddly enough. You'd see these novels being sold there. Or with regards to comic books, they'd be on the rack for 35 cents, and you'd pick one up on your way out the door at the grocery store, which you don't see anymore. So some kids had subscriptions to the Marvel comic books, but not very many. They would just most of the time you just pick them up at the grocery store and read them when you get home.
Oh, those were the days when you can just easily pick them up anywhere. And the price they were too. And I remember like nickel candy and all that. I mean, I'm probably showing some age of mine, but still.
Yeah, they were like, the first ones from the 70s were like 35 cents, something around there. Yeah.
All right. So who was your favorite character? Who is your favorite character of all time? If you can choose one or two. Sometimes it's hard to just choose one in Star Wars.
I like Han Solo quite a bit.
Okay.
I really like him a lot. I was kind of disappointed with the movie effort for that character. I know a lot of people say nobody was asking for it, but I really felt that there was a really good opportunity there to have kind of a Han Solo franchise if it was modeled more after, say, like the James Bond franchise, with every movie being a heist. But going through his origin and how he got his name and stuff was just, and that wasn't anything anyone wanted to see. I don't think. I think if they just went with a straight heist, like boom, here's Han Solo, here's James Bond, like they do, here's an adventure, that probably would have worked out better. But hindsight is 2020, and
and I really think that, because did you read the Han Solo trilogy, either from A.C. Crispin or the Brian Daley? Did you read any of those?
I read the Brian Daley books.
Okay.
Yeah. Many moons ago.
Many moons ago. Oh my God. Now you're speaking my language. No.
Yeah. And I actually picked up the first one, and I was reading it, and I got halfway through it and I got distracted, so I haven't finished it, but I'm in the process of reading that 70s trilogy again.
Nice. We're going to discuss that a little bit more after you get done with that. But speaking of Solo, the Star Wars, the single movie there, it seemed like they were trying their best to make their own, yet they were copying a lot of A.C. Crispin's tale. And because she does give a little small glimpse into Han Solo's past, like how he became who he was, how he was orphaned and stuff. And that was something that, if you're going to make a movie from that trilogy, you can leave that out and keep it mysterious, and then just read the book, and it'll be fine. Like you said, just give us, Han and why he's, him and turning into a smuggler or whatever. That would have been something worth watching. So.
Yeah, I think just going with a straight heist adventure, not worrying about the origin. You watch a James Bond movie and nobody's wondering how he got his name or what he was like when he was a kid or any of that stuff. It's just gets right into it. And I think that would have worked better.
Yeah, and if you wanted to get into it, then there's a novel to expound a little bit more on that. So I mean, it would be a segue into getting into the the EU if you wanted to or not, and it didn't really matter. So.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have expected them to perfectly adapt any of the books. If you're going to go do a movie, you want to have something new and for the audience, that they're not just watching an adapted book. But but it is what it is. They had to make choices, and they made the choices they made, and that's what we got.
All right, so we're starting moving close to the sequel trilogy in what I'm asking you and stuff here. But what was your thought hearing about the buyout of Star Wars? So what did you think about that when you heard Disney was buying, George was selling?
Well, I'll be perfectly honest. I was very optimistic.
Okay.
Because although I enjoyed the prequels, I also recognized that they had a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And I felt that the problems probably came from George not having any kind of oversight, whereas on the original trilogy he did. It's one of the reasons he wanted to get away from the studio system. He didn't want people telling him what to do.
Exactly.
But I think that kind of helped him ultimately. And he didn't have that with the prequel trilogy. And I thought, well, if Disney takes his outline or his treatments for the sequel trilogy and puts, assigns really good screenwriters to do those, I thought, this could be really well. At the time, I thought, Disney is handling Marvel pretty well. Fans are mostly pleased with what they're doing. So I thought, this could turn out really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Little did we know, right? No.
Yeah. What a cluster. Oh boy.
Oh my God. Yes. And so when you because I didn't ask you this question yet, so we're gonna back up a little bit here. Do you have favorites, like any favorite EU books that you've read?
I really enjoyed the tales, the short stories. Tales of Jabba's Palace, Tales of the Cantina, and the Bounty Hunters. Those three I really like quite a bit. Those are probably my favorite. It's just cool getting the little backstory, when you go back and watch the movie and you kind of think about what this guy was doing in between scenes or whatever, that was fun.
Okay.
But I also really like the West End Games source books quite a bit.
Yeah. And George loved the West End Games source books as well. In fact, he inspired like Zahn to use material from that when he was writing the Thrawn trilogy and stuff. And so,
yeah, I imagine they were probably pretty helpful throughout the expanded universe for the writers. I mean, they had encyclopedias they could refer to right there. So it was probably pretty nice.
Exactly. So what did you feel, what were your thoughts when Disney announced that the expanded universe was no longer canon? What did you feel about that? Because that's tearing away some of the mythos.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised. I was surprised by it. It didn't affect me nearly as much as it did a lot of hardcore EU fans, because I was never a hardcore EU fan. I was kind of a casual fan. I've read a number of books, but I was certainly never one who had read every book and every comic, So it didn't affect me as severely as it did a lot of those hardcore EU fans who I know were infuriated.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically it. I just kind of was surprised by it, and I didn't know what was coming down the pike.
Yeah, exactly. That was like the first kind of warning. Like, yeah, I understood that, once they bought the property, they have right to take it and create it under their vision and stuff. So when I heard about the announcement of it no longer being canon, they're not going to use any of it or, honor it. I was like, okay, well, they want to, go ahead and build it in their own vision. I'm excited to see what they're going to bring us with that, with their own lore, I guess you can say. And I was very upset still. So I was kind of conflicted there. I was more or less staying more on the EU side, like I still am right now. But I was curious to see what they were going to do.
Yeah, in retrospect, looking back at it now, I realize, at the time they were coming up with excuses like, well, we had to retcon it because Chewbacca died, or this or that or the other thing, or because the canon was too, difficult to keep up with, or it was too convoluted, or it didn't make sense. And all those reasons turned out to be bunk.
Yeah, of course.
It turns out the real reason is that they wanted to rewrite the mythos in their own image. That was really what it was firebound for, really.
Yeah. And it not only alienated the hardcore fans that got into the EU, the games, and all that, but it started alienating those who really just enjoyed the movies and stuff, because some of the lore that they were recreating, messed with the quality of the movies if you got into their EU.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's putting it lightly.
Yeah. It's the writing is really, I haven't read any of the new material from cover to cover, any of the Disney material, but I've read enough snippets and samples that they've offered online through articles and other, like when Del Rey offers a free chapter or something like that. And the quality of the writing is astonishingly degraded from what it was.
Yeah. Yes. And so let's go ahead and go into this. And I don't know if you're going to have even a proper answer to this one or even favor this answer or whatever. But if you had any favorite, what would be your favorite sequel trilogy movie? That's the hot one of the topic right now. So like if you were saying, like if they're between the three in the Disney trilogy, what would you favor the most?
Out of the Disney trilogy?
I just have to hear, because some people still favor, The Force Awakens, or whatever, even if they don't agree with the direction the DT took the lore.
Well, so. I didn't bother seeing Rise of Skywalker.
Okay.
I had no interest in seeing it whatsoever.
Mhm.
I stopped consuming Disney Star Wars material after I saw The Last Jedi. I stopped consuming it. You know, I've seen clips of things like Solo or The Mandalorian on YouTube, and I tried watching Rogue One, but I fell asleep twice during it. That was before The Last Jedi, though. But well, after The Last Jedi, I had no interest in consuming any of the material they were producing.
Yeah.
And so I've only seen The Force Awakens once and The
Yeah.
Last Jedi once.
Yeah.
So out of those two, I mean, I guess The Force Awakens is better than The Last Jedi, but
Yeah.
that's like saying a horse turd is better than a buffalo turd, you know?
I'm curious. Like I said, some people are like, "Hey, something was going with the Force Awakens until the Last Jedi." So, that's kind of a fair assessment, even though we know that the Force Awakens basically is a soft reboot of A New Hope. So,
yeah, and that's why it was really just a big meh. I got out of there. It was out of The Force Awakens, and it wasn't offensive. But it was just boring. It was just kind of a retread, and it was supposed to be, oh, look at this little girl, rah rah, she's beating up guys, 300 pounds. Yeah, I get it. I don't care. It was just a big shoulder shrug.
Yeah.
But it was inoffensive, and Lucas had said the same thing, that there was nothing new. Boy, was that true. I mean, it was just TIE fighters and X-Wing fighters, and so dull. I mean, even with the prequels, even if you don't like them, there's stuff to excite you visual. There's so much visual candy, so many new things. The experimental nature of the movies is what I particularly like about them. With the sequel trilogy, there's just nothing.
No,
I mean, it's just empty.
Yeah, when the story has nowhere to go and has no direction or anything like that, then people get lost in it. You can enjoy the visuals and stuff, but without the story, it's no good.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing there. The story isn't good. The visuals aren't good. There's no level of anything of interest in either of those movies that I saw, really.
Yeah. And then when you get these soft reboots that tread on like being very familiar to what came before, because when you look between the OT and the PT, yes, George did that, rhyme kind of deal. Like, he made little nods between the Skywalkers and stuff, just to show that familiar, like father, son, kind of aspect and stuff.
Yeah.
But when you take that to the extreme and make, movies that are basically soft reboots, and you could tell the difference. You could tell, Crate is like Hoth, kind of deal, and the scenario is very same, just like A New Hope. It's like The Force Awakens, like A New Hope. That takes you out of the picture because George didn't give us repeat everything from the PT or O to the PT.
Right.
So why should the sequel trilogy be the same? We should have seen evolution over 30 years.
Yeah, they weren't. He had this saying, it's like poetry, it rhymes, because there were certain callbacks there. It kind of echoed a little bit certain sequences, but they weren't carbon copies by any stretch of the words. I mean, you go to The Last Jedi and you've got this. The walkers are a little bit beefier, but they're pretty much the same AT-AT walkers. They're the same X-Wing fighters. They're the same TIE fighters. It's all the same. It's just so boring. I mean, I remember in The Last Jedi, halfway through it, I had wished I had brought a book to read or something. I was so bored. In between being offended.
You went from bored to offended.
It's like, when is this thing going to end? Just
okay. So what was that pivotal moment that made you decide to take the stance that you're taking and speaking up against, the cancel culture mythos kind of stance that you're doing? So what was that breaking point when you seen those movies for you?
it was definitely came after The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
During the period of The Force Awakens, I had commented online here and there on the imdb.com forums, mostly before they were vaporized. And, it was just amazing how anywhere you criticize anything that has to do with a really far left ideology gets you banned or heavily moderated, So I just decided to hell with it. I'm just going to open up my own blog.
Yeah.
And that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah, and your blog really gets a lot of attention, and there's YouTubers like myself that we look forward to your stealthy research and what you find and what you put together, and your time and dedication is amazing, and you're making sure that you have the facts before you lay them down.
I try to most of the, I obviously I'm human, so I make mistakes here and there. But if someone points them out to me, I'm happy to correct them, rectify it. And I don't spend all that much time on it, to be honest. I'm a fairly quick typer.
Yeah.
And that was one of the advantages of opening up a blog, is that, producing a video takes a lot more time than typing up a blog post. Post, if I have all the information, I can type it up in 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And shoot it out.
Yeah, you do some, I mean, you're to the point you're on it with everything you do. And even your YouTube channel, you take that time to make these documentaries and collecting your information. We've discussed, there was stuff that you asked me about when you did, doing your research and stuff. And, they're really well done. You take your time and put a lot of effort into that. And, I really enjoy that, and I really honor that, because with everything that we're seeing with the direction of Star Wars that they're taking, we don't know if when they're gonna stop printing the EU, or we don't know exactly what's going to happen inside their franchise right now with the loss of Gina Carano and all that little tiny debacle going on with that.
Yeah. So, well, it's a lot of questions swirling around in the air. I had heard rumors that they were going to stop printing the EU in Europe. I don't know if they have already or not. Okay. I imagine they'll stop printing it when it stops making them money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or when the generation that grew up with them ages out and isn't interested anymore, and they become forgotten.
Yeah. Exactly. And talking with Stig and stuff, sometimes it's hard for him to find certain novels in Europe area where he lives at and stuff. And so I wouldn't put it past them to, not do the reprint of, of either English or whatever language that they reprinted it in Europe and stuff. My fear is that they'll stop completely printing, once there's not a need for it. However, when I go purchase books, like even at Barnes and Nobles, I talk with the manager there about Star Wars, and he and she both, they tell me that their top selling Star Wars novels are Legends novels right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I often wonder, I see the covers of the new material they're putting out. So boring, so dull, so drab. It never would have attracted me to purchase any of that material. The covers of like the High Republic, they're all pastel. They look like Easter eggs. They're just really boring stuff. The title of the franchise is Star Wars, and half the time the covers don't even look like they're in a war. It looks like they're in I don't know, like a kiddie playground or something. It's just really weird.
Yeah.
Like they're at McDonald's land or something. It's just completely. Why would I want to read this if I'm interested in Star Wars?
the cover has to catch you. And like, I have like, even the X-Wing series, and you can kind of see in my background all my books behind me.
Yeah.
I'm in my art studio, but I have my bookshelf in here as well. And when you look at the covers, no matter, something like the sometimes the Asian covers of certain novels are more well done than the American cover of Star Wars novels, but when you look at them, like especially the X-Wing, I'm going to use that example. You see the X-Wings, you see them in action in the front cover. But then when you look at Alphabet Squadron, nothing. It's nothing. There's nothing that catches my eye to think, oh, well, I'm going to go ahead and read about this scenario that's on this cover.
No, they don't look like they're about war.
Mm-hmm.
They look like it's about something else entirely. I'm not quite sure what, but not anything I would be interested in.
Oh my God, I know. It's crazy. It's insane and stuff. So we have noticed, and someone is asking this question too, Luke, I guess you could say, Skywalker. Okay, what made you delete all your tweets? And so I'm guessing he's talking about your recent Ryan
Sure.
Johnson spaz of delete.
So I've been under siege. There's a particular SJW, an activist, who is kind of rallying others around him to target me because he's kind of identifies me as the source of all of these, like the Justina Ireland story, the Christina Ariel story, and a number of other things. Yeah. So they've been targeting me to report my tweets. So I mass deleted them and, basically take away the tweets that they're able to report.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is with Twitter, because it's owned and operated by these far left SJW types, they deliberately design the terms of service and the rules to be very vague. They're purposely vague because then they can punish their political enemies and give their political allies a pass, all with the same actions. But then kind of invent reasons for each individual case, or not even bother. In most cases, if you get some kind of action against you, they really don't give you a particular reason why this particular thing was bad. Yeah. They had reported a couple of tweets that locked my account. I had to delete the tweets, and they said that I was inciting violence, which I absolutely was not. I put the tweets, the offending tweets, on my blog, and what they said they were didn't apply to the actual tweets. But again, you're dealing with really far left people, so it's not about the rules. They want to be able to do whatever they want to do to you if they disagree with your politics. And that's why at some point it's an inevitability, my Twitter account will vaporize at some point. At some point they'll get me because they're not going to stop.
No, they're not. And we see that firsthand with Gina Carano. I'm going to go ahead and grab this super sticker real quick. Sure. Thank you so much for Noron Blythers, $9.99, little fox holding a little heart. Thank you so much for the little Valentine super sticker. And you guys, any, super chat, super sticker, even become a member helps, my channel with me, getting more, purchasing more comics and stuff for content for this channel as well. So thank you for your support. So let's go ahead and get into the Gina Carano and this whole Cold War or Civil War rumor, people have sources kind of talk that's going on. And firsthand what it feels like to be attacked by cancel culture. Even though her outcome was different than what you're experiencing, it's still the same thing.
Well, it is, and I think I mentioned to you earlier, it's interesting because, the SJWs, Gina, like somebody like Gina will broadcast, her thoughts on Twitter. It's a public square. SJWs will come out in force and reply to it very unkindly. Others come in and reply to it kindly. And I perfectly honest, don't see a problem with either of that, because I'm a big believer in free speech. And, if somebody's broadcasting their thoughts, then people can come over and reply to it.
Yeah.
But the SJWs aren't like that. When you turn the tables and you showcase something they say, and then you respond to it, then they call that harassment. But when they do it to Gina, they call it activism.
Yes.
So it's complete hypocrisy.
It is.
But it is what it is. With regards to the Civil War, I don't buy any of it. It's not a completely unreasonable rumor, because big companies often will have competing CEOs that kind of, rivals and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Everybody's probably seen the most popular example of that might be in the movie RoboCop, maybe. Where you had the young guy creating RoboCop and the old guy was there with his robot, and those two really butted heads. You see that sort of thing in companies happen. But with Lucasfilm, I don't see that happening. Everyone over there thinks exactly alike.
Yeah.
The whole thing with Gina Carano too. I gotta tell you, it's really astonishing, because I'm not quite sure where to go with this, but there was a video that David Stewart put out that really kind of started to make me think about certain things. And it was about how Gina Carano being fired didn't matter. And ultimately, I think he's right, because, everyone, you look at the backlash from The Last Jedi, and everybody was swearing up and down at Disney, and everybody was mad at how people from Disney and Lucasfilm were talking to the fans and all this stuff. And everybody was swearing it off. And then all of a sudden, The Mandalorian came around, and now people that were criticizing it suddenly became persona non grata.
Yeah.
Because a certain element decided they liked The Mandalorian, so now we should shut up.
Yeah.
But now this happens, and those same people are angry again. But Dave Stewart's point, and I think I agree with him, is that, in another year, when Mandalorian 3 rolls around, all they're going to have to do is put some dude in a Boba Fett costume, give you 5 minutes of CGI Luke, and they'll be begging for more again. You know?
Yeah.
So a lot of it kind of, right now I'm at this point where I'm thinking, is a lot of this even worth it? I feel like walking away from all of it with Gina Carano.
Oh, wow. At that pivotal moment. Myself, I've came in to compare and contrast between the two lores. Like I said, I am more or less on George Lucas era of Star Wars, and that's where my love and passion is. However, I will investigate and compare and contrast between the lores and both the lores, and share what may be similar, because I will give credit where credit's due, and then what they're doing to destroy those mythos that are tied to the movies. And so I continue to even, share how much The Mandalorian broke the lore to the movies. And I've shared, different scenarios like that and stuff. But because it was such a good movie or series to a lot of people, and that they decided to, give Disney, and this is probably a fair assessment, give Disney one more chance, Disney Star Wars one more chance. Maybe that's what they were thinking. I was basically, the bad guy. I was making them feel like this movie, like I was questioning their likability, even though what I like and don't like doesn't really hurt what they like or don't like, unless they give you that power. And then I was called an EU elitist.
I know, which is just a bizarre term to me. Oh, it's so weird.
Yes.
but yeah, so it's like, what is the point of all this if the next time they flash out, uh, Boba Fett, some guy in a Boba Fett costume walking around, and these guys are all gonna fall at their feet and declare Favreau and Filoni the saviors of Star Wars again? What the hell are we even doing any of this for?
Yeah.
I mean, especially when these guys are calling like Henry Gilroy, the writer of guy who wrote for Clone Wars and I think Rebels. He's calling Gina a jackbooted racist thug and all this really absurd stuff, this bizarre heated hyperbole, and everybody's giving money to these people still. And,
exactly.
If what we're doing isn't making any difference, if they're just gonna fall at their feet every time they see a lightsaber swing across the screen, what is the point of all of it? And I don't know that I have an answer right now.
Yeah.
But the whole Civil War thing is a little bit different, is an entirely different subject than Gina Carano. Partly, I don't think it's happening. People call Filoni and Favreau the savior of Star Wars. I never bought that.
No.
People are choosing to ignore what Filoni said in that video when he was mocking critics of Rey and the Force Awakens. I don't care if he was at a women's conference. He said what he said, and the snark in his voice was real. They choose to ignore the documented statements from Filoni in The Art of the Rise of Skywalker, where he talks about changing everything to put the focus on Leia, make it matriarchal rather than patriarchal, and all this silly SJW stuff. I mean, it's all on record. And, they ignore the fact, they choose to ignore that in the season 7 of the Clone Wars that Disney put out, it was Filoni who changed the male Asian character into those two shaven head ciphers for Raylos, is really what they are. And, Filoni has done all this stuff and more. I know Ryan Kinnell complains quite a bit about a lot of the stuff he has done, which I'm sure he's done more than I'm even aware of. Ryan is probably really the expert in that. But people choose to ignore all of that stuff. Because they get the good feels when they see fat Boba Fett bouncing on the screen.
Yeah.
So what is the point of all of it? I don't know.
Exactly. And I got into the Clone Wars, and I seen exactly all the missteps, and researched it and stuff as well. So I am like on that with Ryan about Filoni and stuff, and I do get a lot of heat because I don't put Filoni on a pedestal. I don't say he's George's apprentice because I'd never seen him that way.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
and a lot of this stuff with I know a lot of Doomcock's rumors. I like Doomcock on a personal level quite a bit. But I think I don't think he's a liar at all. I don't think he's making things up. No. I think he is getting information, but I think the people feeding him information are either completely off base or they're outright liars. We know that people feed their rivals false information to discredit them. We have it on record. We have them talking about it. We have screen caps of them talking about it. So we know it goes on. And, it's amusing that, here Doomcock puts out a rumor that, how it played out was Gina got fired, right? Then Doomcock gets a rumor from his sources saying, well, her fate is up in the air. They might rehire her. Then we find out her agency dropped her. Then the next day, she's already got a deal with Daily Wire for a movie, right? So she didn't just negotiate a deal in 24 hours. I can tell you that much. She knew that this was happening for a long time. She had probably been talking to Daily Wire for weeks, if not months, knowing that this was inevitable, that this was going to happen at some point. So that was probably already negotiated. which would mean then that the people who are feeding Doomcock this information about her fate being up in the air were either completely making. I can't imagine any scenario where they weren't lying to do that.
And I'm one of his channel members, and I've been watching him since I decided to back a lot of people before I had my channel myself on the annihilation of the mythos and stuff with Star Wars. And I do too think that he is being manipulated and that he's being fed false information. And because it's like, bam, he all of a sudden, after this whole scenario of Gina getting fired to being hired for Daily Wire, it's like, I was like, okay, so what is Doomcock, what is his sources going to say? And bam, he has it right away. But then everything that's happening to her contradicts what he's been given.
Right. And that's what those people who lie to their rivals, they send them. What they'll do is they'll send them tips via email, but they'll create more than one email account, right? So they'll send him the same tip, but it'll from both email accounts, but it looks like it's coming from two different people. So they're the same tip, but they're coming from they're written in different ways, so they look like they're coming from different perspectives, and then they appear to corroborate one another. And then you end up with stuff like this, and they'll do that. They'll deliberately have knowledge of, say, oh yeah, we know that Gina Carano is going to get fired tomorrow, so we know that she's got to deal with Daily Wire, so let's send Doomcock a tip that they might rehire her, knowing that the next day they're going to announce that she's got to deal with Daily Wire, and it's going to make her look like a fool. They do this deliberately.
Yeah. And it makes me sad, because I know he has passion. He has passion for bringing us and making us aware of what's going on, and speaking out against the destroying of our mythos and everything. And so it just it's sad to see that happen. But then also it's to a lot of people now it's becoming comical, which also breaks my heart with that. And even with me, I don't really even take it. I don't even take it with a grain of salt. I'm like, if you can't prove your source, and this goes with when I used to work in background department, do background investigations. If someone came to me with a rumor, I couldn't take it as fact. I'm like, okay, so we need this, and this document. You need to prove, this rumor or this speculation or this account. If you can't do that, then I can't take it as true account or whatever. And that's how I see with the sources, that if you can't provide actual tangible proof to back your sources, it's nothing. It's nothing.
I've had people come to me with rumors through email, and I respond to them by telling them I need some kind of documentation. Sometimes they'll respond to that by giving me a link to imdb.com, which really is not good enough.
No, anybody, that's not.
And that's where the conversation ends.
Yeah, exactly. So I just sit there and watch it go down. It's kind of a bit frustrating. I get annoyed and then I laugh because if you can't prove it, it's nothing. It's nothing without the proof. If the company hasn't come forward with any kind of like change of direction with their lore, because if they can announce that they're getting rid of the EU, the original EU, they can announce saying, hey, we're going to go into a multiverse, or we're going this way with this, and it's not going to really go into the sequel trilogy, which we know that Favreau has said plenty of times on numerous occasions that it's going to basically reveal the First Order.
Yeah, he's said it outright multiple times. I can't imagine that the whole idea that they're going to retcon the sequel trilogy, to me, is just pure bunk. Because absolutely nothing that's happening in the public sphere indicates that. Because on the one hand, like you say, Favreau has said talked numerous times about linking up with the existing sequel trilogy. You have Favreau, who pushed the sequel trilogy in a certain way. So why would he have any motivation at all to retcon a sequel trilogy that turned out the way he wanted it? That doesn't make any sense. And then you have the fact in the show itself. I've seen clips of where they're clearly things where they're clearly linking it up to the sequel trilogy. So unless they're going to pull some kind of crazy Ivan, I just don't see it happening at all.
Yeah.
And perhaps there's some Disney influencer that's getting paid to float these rumors out just to keep people viewing the show in hopes that they will, so they can maintain ratings. That's kind of a way out in left field theory.
Yeah.
I'm just purely speculating. But there are Disney influencers that work in that kind of capacity.
Yeah.
So who's to say? Who knows? At this point, I honestly don't care what they produce. I don't care if they rehired Gina. I'm not interested in anything they put out.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people that are just fed up, and so I'm over here like, okay, well, come join me in the EU part, George Lucas era, where everything is, the heart is still there, and this, I'm going to get to these 2 super chats and then we'll move on here. So I do have a super sticker from Noran Blythers with the little dancing fox with the hearts. Thank you so much. And then I also have Open Airlock Policy. Thank you so much for coming with the 350 super chat. Respect to Itchy for being consistent.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Yes, and there you go. So with what you were expounding on, because I think I'm starting to think that the Luke Skywalker scene was just a PR. You know how sometimes if something goes wrong, they dangle something in front of you to kind of distract you?
Yeah. It's really hard to say. It could easily just be a matter of we got to do something drastic to bring fans back.
Yes.
Although, from all accounts, the viewership on Mandalorian was pretty well. So I don't know that they necessarily needed to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe it was an attempt to quiet down the criticism, which really never died since The Last Jedi was released.
Yeah.
The online criticism has pretty much continued nonstop since then. Maybe it was an attempt to quiet it down, but because of who the Lucasfilm people are who they are, apparently, it was only a matter of time before they squandered that goodwill. And it ended up not being that long at all.
Yeah.
But, who's to say? In the long run, I think they've got a difficult problem on their hands because Baby Yoda was such a big part of the show, right? So without him, and Luke is obviously a significant part of the franchise. So now if them two are going off together, there must be a story there somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I have to think that they're going to do a Luke show at some point.
Yeah.
Because, how could they just leave that thread untouched unless they do a series of crappy novels and comics? Maybe they might, but I would be surprised if they didn't try to do some Luke and Baby Yoda show.
Yeah. And, and then talking about Filoni, and we know his direction on, giving ideas for the sequel trilogy, and basically casting Luke Skywalker into the shadows. And so, looking at The Mandalorian and seeing them bring back Luke and people thinking, oh, well, it's going to be a course correction for Luke Skywalker. So he's not going to be linked into the sequel trilogy. I still can vision and see them still linking him into the sequel trilogy because we still have like 25 years. A lot can happen in that time frame.
Yeah, definitely.
So we could still see Luke, at his prime in those early years. And then as things go along, they can create scenarios to make him start being more cynical.
And even if they do, it's just so boring because it ends up hooking up with him, teaching Kylo Ren and that whole scenario and going into the First Order, which is just boring. It's just I'm not interested in any of those
Yeah.
situations at all. They're just all boring to me.
Yeah, exactly. And we have Terminus at $2 super chat. Thank you so much. Every bit helps the channel. Itchy, where do Favreau's loyalties really lie? So what do you think about that? Where do you think Favreau's, like, if we can't really fully say because he doesn't really tweet any controversy things. He
Yeah.
doesn't really give out any speculations or anything on hinting, where he lies. As if there's any kind of civil war or Cold War.
Yeah, I think his loyalties lie with his paycheck. I don't see any indication really that he is presenting a serious rivalry to Kathleen Kennedy or has any desire to.
Yeah.
If that had been the case, enough time has passed where something would have come out in the public sphere beyond these rumors. And nothing ever has. There were no snide comments, we've seen nothing of that nature in the public sphere. Because there's an old saying, if there's an old saying that says 3 can keep a secret if 2 are dead.
Yeah.
Right. So if there was a serious rivalry between these two, a lot of people would know about it. Something would come out.
Yeah.
In
And
the public sphere.
yeah, exactly. Which media would because media, they will go and they're friggin' like beasts. They will go and swarm on any type of source that will give them views.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that drastic to where Kennedy doesn't have any power pertaining to her job and her contract, then I think it would be more than just insider accounts coming out. That's how I see that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's been a crazy ride since the buyout, and a lot of people, I hope they do hold, if they're going to be true to the words. I hope that the ones that said they're going to not give anything back to Disney Star Wars, that they hold true to that. Mind you, like we pointed out, like you pointed out, once something new comes along, everything changes.
Yeah, I think for a lot of these newer fans that kind of hitched a ride since Disney came along, this is more or less a passing fad. And as soon as the next big thing comes along, they'll jump ship for the new thing. Probably maybe Batman or Dune, because both of those have the potential for that Twilight-esque viewership. At that point you may see a lot of fans jump ship, but these are not the people that are going to stick around with the franchise for 40 years.
Exactly. So we have Lord Vader here. Itchy, how do you think the fans will react to future of Star Wars? So what do you think because we can only speak for ourselves and only speak for what we see that is maybe tweeted on Twitter or social media, but what do you think fans how they will react to the future of Star Wars?
Well, it all depends on the content they put out. If they continue to put out this Disney trilogy type of material, they're going to continue to get a lackluster reaction from the audience. We've already seen that the problems started with the second weekend in the box office with the Last Jedi, where they had a huge, massive drop off.
Oh, they made a record. First Star Wars film that did a record, but in the wrong direction of wanting to create a record. so that was odd.
Yeah. So we already knew that people weren't coming back for repeat viewings, which is odd for a Star Wars movie to begin with. But then in between that and the third installment, people were arguing that, oh, well, of course the second installment always dips and then the third rises up again. But that didn't happen.
No, the Rise of Skywalker didn't rise.
No, it did not. It fell again.
Yeah, just like the Last Jedi.
So if they continue to put out this uninspired material, it'll just kind of it'll continue on, but it's like The Walking Dead. It's just a shell of its former self, and eventually, over time, I've often thought that a big bulk of the reason why today's SJWs are interested in being in the fandom really has to do more with the arguments and calling people racists and istophobes and all of that kind of stuff. They're more interested in that because they see it as a form of cultural conquest, right? They move into this area and they squat on this territory.
Yeah.
And that's really what they're interested in more than the franchise itself. And once all of us, abandon it and leave, and there's no one to argue with anymore, there's no one to take territory away from, they're probably going to lose interest in it too.
And move on to something else.
Something else where they can argue with people and try to squat on territory that they think belongs to someone else. It's all a silly notion, but that's the type of thing that goes through their heads.
Yes. So let's get into more of this, the hypocrisy of Disney Star Wars or Disney Lucasfilm when it comes to employees and who can post what and who will be reprimanded over, what they posted. And this goes into, and everybody has watched this go down. I mean, I was literally on Toxic Femininity when we seen the post about Gina being let go. And, it all goes back to the Yahtzees. I'm gonna just put it that way.
Yeah.
And what's so crazy about that is that I'm noticing the hypocrisy because this has nothing to do with George, but I'm just gonna point this out. When George created the Empire, the imperial rule, he also used a lot of Nazi culture for that. Then Disney Lucasfilm took the same inspiration and created their films. They followed suit. And so so there's the hypocrisy of and being inspired by the Yahtzees to build your franchise, your villains in the franchise, but then it's not okay for one of the employees to notice and compare governments and how if we're not careful we can fall into the same direction the Yahtzees did to the Jews.
Yeah. It's just so odd how a lot of them are pontificating about how horrible it is that she used a simplistic comparison to the Yahtzees and the situation, the Rolo cost. I mean, I don't. It's so silly we can't even use these words. But
I know, right? I'm all Yahtzee, I want to play Yahtzee, but we know what we're talking about.
That's what the entire Star Wars franchise itself is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a comparison. It's a simplistic comparison.
Yep.
So to say that we can't talk about it when George has been doing it throughout all of his movies, and Disney has too now, is absolutely ridiculous.
And then there's also that backlash, because someone on Twitter is telling me, well, it was the Jew community that were pissed off at her for posting that. I'm like, no, it was basically cancel culture. The Jewish community does not make up cancel culture. And I go, I find it ironic that the Orthodox Jew owner of Daily Wire is the one who hired her.
yeah, right. Yeah, that's pretty funny. There's two aspects as to why they were so mad. One of it is there's a certain portion of them that will get mad when anyone they don't like says anything at all. They have a hissy fit over whatever it is. Doesn't matter what they say. If they don't like the person, they'll have a hissy fit over it.
Yeah.
So whatever they say is irrelevant. But then there's another aspect of it. SJWs get incandescent when you start to compare them to the Nazis or the Yahtzees, and you start showing the parallels in their ideology. Because let's face it, the desire to silence people, the desire to take away your employment, all this stuff is fascist in nature. That's what fascists do.
Yeah.
So they don't like it. They do not like to hear that, but that's the way it is anyway. So, and most of them don't understand this because they don't read history books. They don't even watch documentaries without falling asleep during them a quarter of the way through. They're mostly uneducated about the topic. They get all of their knowledge about the Yahtzees from Captain America comic books and Indiana Jones movies. And that's really the extent of their knowledge. They have this comic book understanding of the Yahtzees, and that's what they base their ideology on. And, at this point, I'm not even sure that it would qualify as an ideology anymore. It really is just mass hysteria.
Yeah, I agree. And so what do you think about rules for thee, but not for me kind of deal when we have, one employee who can, basically spew racism about a culture while the other one can't even say that they don't want to use pronouns in their bio. So what do you think about that? Because I know you really got into a lot of that research and really pulled that out.
Well, it's ridiculous. I don't think anybody should be fired for saying almost anything. Not even Pedro Pascal. The only person I think who deserved it was Chuck Wendig, because he's telling people to throw themselves into a wood chipper.
Yeah,
that's a little extreme, but any kind of political talk is fine. I find it really amusing because Hal Hickel, the animation director from The Mandalorian, went on a big rant about how proud he was that he worked for a company that valued free speech. And, this isn't the first time it's happened. It happened to Rachel Butera, too. They got rid of her. So, Hal is full of crap.
And what's very ironic is that, when the buyout happened and Kathy announced that, she wants to bring in strong female leads and characters, what have you. And she preached about, the Force is female. And I'm like being exaggerated, maybe not being exaggerating about this, but we knew her direction that she decided to go. And so, she brought us Rey. They brought us, other characters that they really didn't flesh out very well. And then finally we get Gina Carano, which she's not really my favorite character, but with the writing, and I'm sorry, some of you guys probably won't agree with me in the chat, but with the writing of The Mandalorian, it's kind of hard. The bar is already low, so it's kind of hard to really, set the, with a good character to really reach that expectation because they have the bar so low. So Gina was there. She was cool. I really didn't favor her as well, but there was a lot of characters there that were lackluster anyways. And so the point I'm getting at is that we, finally the fans are attached to a female character that, we've seen Kathy Kennedy, preach about, saying she wanted to bring us, and then yet they fire the very actress who portrays that character. And it's like, okay, so what about women's rights that you want to put out in the forefront?
Well, those go out the door when you disagree with the collective.
Yeah.
The moment you disagree with their political viewpoint, all that white knighting about women this and women that goes right out the window. None of it matters. But I don't, know Gina Carano. I don't talk to her on a personal level or anything like that. I don't have conversations with her. So all I can do is speculate. But to be perfectly honest, with how quick she turned around with that Daily Wire deal, knowing that had to have been a negotiation for weeks, if not months, knowing that she probably knew that this was coming. And maybe I have to wonder if she pushed this to happen to get out. Because can you imagine being around those people day in, day out, and then the prospect of being potentially signed on to a spin-off show that might run for 5 years where you're around these people day in, day. I can't imagine not wanting to look for an escape from that.
That is very interesting because that like what the rumors and speculation is that Favreau has full control of like who he brings in and everything that has to do with Mandalorian. So if she is not enjoying being around people who are chastising her or making her feel bad about her political stance or even her ideologies or what have you, it has to come first and foremost from the people that she directly works with. Now we have to think about that.
Yeah, yeah. I just. I wonder, but who knows what the truth is? Someday we'll maybe get an awesome tell-all interview with her.
Oh God, I hope so because it's like they're like, oh, they have full control. Kennedy doesn't, but then and then so then it lends to like, okay, so she got fired. So is it Favreau and Filoni that decided to write up that that the paper, here, go, we toss you out the side because we don't like your political views. So if they have that kind of power, then they're the ones that helped her fire her.
Yeah, and I think I'm ready to walk away with Gina.
Oh wow, that's such a strong statement right there because you did put a lot of work over the years with Star Wars. Yes, you were more into the movies and a little bit of the EU, but you had that love, connection, and passion towards it, what George created. And to get to this point where it's like I'm ready to go the opposite way, that speaks volumes.
Well, I did. And, a lot of it, J.W. Rinsler talked about this too, how he did not like the Disney era material either, because from his perspective, Star Wars was an expression of the artist George Lucas. And I tend to agree with them. Without him at the helm, at least providing, the treatments which they tossed out, it really doesn't hold any interest for me. And that was really kind of, I would go so far as to say that was a cultural crime, because Lucas, whether you like him or hate him, he was kind of an American Tolkien. And to just carelessly toss out his treatments like that because Abrams and Kennedy had wanted to feed their egos, just so shallow. It really was a cultural crime. I feel very strongly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I do have people saying that they're just going to walk away as well. I've talked to people on social media about that. And encouraging, if you really, really loved the direction and what George was building with his company before the buyout, because we know that the reason he decided to sell was so we could still have Star Wars. He put faith into the people he was selling to get betrayed. And so if you really, really want to stay where the heart is, just come and, and join us with the George Lucas era of Star Wars. Basically my hashtag, I choose legends, where we still get the heart of Star Wars. Yes, George was involved with the EU. He helped craft it. He set rules and guidelines where they can go and where they can't go, especially when it comes to the movie, his character's development in that EU, in the EU.
I mean, he was a guy that was clearly interested in mythology.
Yes.
So of course he would have had an interest in playing some role in crafting, the EU. How much of a role, I guess people will debate until the end of time, but clearly he had some role in it.
Yeah.
And the quality of the material speaks for itself, or the lack of. I mean, there's such a stark difference between Lucas era and Disney era material that you can't really confuse the two.
No, you can't. And maybe that's a blessing in disguise if we think about that.
I think it is. In retrospect, I know people were mad about the firebombing and the labeling of legends, but ultimately I think Disney unwittingly did the EU fans a huge favor because it made the EU untouchable. It's completely separated genuine Star Wars from Disney Star Wars. So now it's very easy to distinguish the two. I mean, they even have it on the covers, the Legends banner. So because can you imagine a scenario where let's say they hadn't firebombed the EU.
Yeah.
And they had continued it on with the current crop of authors. And they would have been not only continuing it, but also writing other stories within it, kind of in the same way they're doing with the original trilogy now, right? Trying to change the perspective of the original trilogy to kind of bend more towards their politics. They would have been doing that the same with the entire EU. And now they haven't been doing it. And they can't because it's completely separated.
Yeah.
So, in a lot of ways, they really did you guys a favor, all EU fans a huge favor, I think, without realizing it.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I've been trying to tell people, because they're like, oh, we don't like the banner, blah, 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 blah. When with looking at the evidence we're discussing right here, with the direction that they took Star Wars, and not a very favorable one for a lot of fans. There are fans that, either love the new lore or kind of sit on the fence with that. And I'm not trying to bash anybody for their likes or dislike, their likes in Star Wars, other than, maybe do your research with, the direction that Star Wars is going within their own company and how they treat their people. If anything, that would be a standpoint on deciding which way you want to go as well. Because when you give money to a company that doesn't, hold to, equality, and fairness and freedom of speech and stuff like that, then you're saying it's okay to censor and it's okay to, belittle people, and at worst, allow people with racist tactic, no matter who they're talking about.
Oh yeah.
And,
yeah.
So I don't care for that whatsoever. That's not my thing. I want, like, within our society, I want us to be able to sit down and discuss, even if we don't have the same political view, discuss without anger, without threat, without thinking you're racist or phobic or this or that, and come to a common ground. And that's what we need.
Yeah, I completely agree. From my perspective, this obsession over race and gender is complete and total waste of time. Instead of talking about race and gender 24/7, or engaging in activism over that all of the time, people could be working towards colonizing Mars, or turning desert into farmland, or finding a cure for cancer, or all of these things they could be spending their time on, instead of arguing about race and gender. It's such a silly thing to do, particularly since there really is no such thing as separate human races. It doesn't exist. If it did, we wouldn't be able to interbreed, which we do all of the time, every day.
Yeah.
So you're arguing over a completely illusory problem.
Yeah, exactly. So, and so we're going to start wrapping things up here. So if there's anything else you want to add, or, just make awareness to what you're working on right now. We all know that you are basically in the spotlight of cancel culture right now. I'm so sorry.
Well, it is what it is. It was going to come at some point.
Yeah.
It was really inevitable. And that's perfectly fine. Ultimately, it just serves as another example of who those people are.
Yeah.
They want to silence anyone they disagree with, because they can't think of ideas to counter points.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I probably maybe gonna move on from my blog because of the issues with Gina Carano that I spoke about. With people falling at their feet to Filoni and Favreau because they gave them 5 minutes of Luke Skywalker swinging a lightsaber.
Yeah.
And they're going to do it again. They might be angry about Gina Carano now, but the moment the next trailer for the Mando or Book of Boba Fett comes out, they'll be falling at their feet again.
Yeah.
And, so I'm probably going to move on from my blog, I think. because of
Yeah,
that.
and I see the same prediction, whatever. Brian McCain said Lucas always said that EU was an alternate universe timeline from his Star Wars films, etc. He did say that there is a hierarchy of canon. Basically, the movies were the foundation and everything tied into the movies, making everything one continuity and one canon. And that's what his company basically kept on stating and everything with that. And
Yeah,
so it was.
there's like 5 layers of canon. They're even named. They're like G
Mhm.
canon, A canon. They have
Yeah.
names. Uh,
Yeah, there's G canon for George's movies.
mhm.
There's T canon for only the Clone Wars, which is odd because George also made the holiday special. He also made, like the Ewok, series, cartoon
Yeah.
series, and Moose TV series and stuff. But those are all in C canon, and so we have C canon, which is basically the novels and some of the games. Most of the games landed in S canon, which is basically quasi canon, where how you played the game not necessarily happened the way it did in the lore.
Yeah.
George was really big at, with games where you can, turn characters the way you want them to be. And so everything that happened there didn't really happen inside the lore. So we had that hierarchy of canon that basically all the foundation was the movies, and they all sync together really, really well into one continuity and canon.
Mhm.
So he was brilliant on that. And I don't see, people argue that back and forth. And it makes it sound like George was against his own company when they said something like that, and he wasn't.
I'll tell you what, I think a lot of it comes from agents who have a vested interest in pushing the Disney canon. They
Mm-hmm.
want to try to discredit the EU, say it wasn't George anyways, to somehow kind of equalize it with the disc canon, because disc canon isn't George either.
Yeah.
And I really do think a lot of that comes from agents who have a vested interest in pushing disc canon.
Exactly. And even some of it, like Pablo Hidalgo changed his mind on his direction on some stuff. And even Leland Chi in 2018 changed his direction. And people will present that information to me. And I'm like, we had Leland Chi, who was basically stating under George that everything is canon and continuity to the movies. And then after like how many years since the buyout, he's finally saying that no, he was wrong. And you have to consider he's not going to bite the hand that feeds him.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Exactly. And they want to make it seem like, nothing was important other than what George did, even though theirs is not even in continuity then in sync because George didn't create the DT.
Yeah, yeah,
So if you want to go that way, if you want to
yeah,
go that
definitely. I mean, obviously he played a role in the EU,
way.
and those of us who were around at the time, we all know that. So a lot of these people that are pushing other ideas, I think, like I said, have a vested interest in pushing disc canon, trying to discredit the EU for whatever reason. If it can even be discredited, I don't know. But I don't think any of those arguments are made in good faith.
Yeah, and I recommend anybody here to go subscribe to Matt Wilkins. He does have done extensive research using like the insider magazines and other researches into that very subject with George and the EU. So that is a worth listen to because he does point out there is a hierarchy. Yes, George has final say. That's his company. Automatically he would have final say. We haven't disputed that either. And there is a hierarchy of canon, but when everything went together coherently in one continuity.
Yeah.
So, go ahead and people go check out Matt Wilkins' channel. He is another person who really, really is a strong EU channel. And over his years since being introduced to Star Wars himself, has created a love and passion for Star Wars as well. So,
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. All right. So, Itchy Bacca, tell us where we can find you at, or hopefully we can continue to find you at soon.
Well, you can find me on my on Twitter for the time being. I also have a Minds account, a Parlor account, a Gab account, which all under the same name, Itchy Bacca. I also have a YouTube channel and a BitChute channel under the same name, Itchy Bacca. And then, of course, my blog, which I don't think I'm going to be posting much there anymore. That's it.
All right. So thank you, everybody. We have a steady like 38 to 42 people in the chat or viewing. And I thank you guys so much for coming in. And, like I said, I wanted to peel back, Itchy's onion. And just get into, like who he is when it comes to Star Wars, how he got started with Star Wars, all of that leading up to, what he has been doing, and he's been out there in the forefront with, revealing everything that's been going on. And myself and other channels has used his articles, to make aware of what's going on as well. And so you are very respected in the community.
Thank you.
You are. And I thank you for your efforts and even your YouTube channel as well. So you can find all his information down in the descriptions below. And I will put a link to Mac Wilkins' channel as well in there after I'm done here. So thank you again. And thank you to Soul Assassin for moderating. Thank you so much. He's been really good at sharing links and stuff. And I appreciate every single one of you guys here today. So thank you again. And may the force be with you.
Yep. May the force be with you. Have a good evening.
Oh, geez.